So today I am outside for our final musical geek out session. Sorry, since I'm outside there's like a lot more noise, but there's more noise inside, so I was like, oh, the lesser of evils. So today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite musicals. I actually saw it for the first time when I was in high school. My high school had done it and I fell in love with it. It's kind of lengthy. My notes are colorful today, so that's fun. But it's a lot, so we'll get through it. Okay, so today we're talking about Little Women, the musical. So some statistics and stuff that we get through every time. We talk about, okay, so book by Alan Nee, music is by Jason Howland, and the lyrics are by Mindy Dickstein? Sure. I'm terrible with names, as always. And this, you probably know Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. She wrote, it's a two-volume autobiographical, I'm not doing well today, novel by her. So the main character is based off of her, and she writes these characters about her life, that are in her life. So the show went on Broadway in January of 2005, and it lasted 137 performances, and it's had a couple of different tours and stuff. And some of the cast, so everyone should know by now, Sutton Foster, obsessed. She plays our main character, Jo. And then we have Maureen McGovern plays Marmee. Marmee's is mom, how they call mom. Aunt March is played by Janet Carroll. Jenny Powers plays Meg. Megan McGinnis plays Beth, and Amy is played by Amy McAlexander. And actually two actors we've seen before in this series. Sutton Foster played Fiona in Shrek, so if you watch that one, you may remember the name. And then Megan McGinnis played Jerusha in Daddy Longlegs, if you listen to that one, that Geek Out session. So, a couple of things I wanted to mention is that this show is, double casted in the way that in the original Broadway, okay, the way the show goes, it's like you see parts of Jo's writing in the show, and so some of the characters will play who are in Jo's family that we're watching are also in Jo's writing, and we're just like seeing her like tell the story, but you get to see it on stage of her like telling the story. So there's only 10, in the original Broadway, there were 10 people in the cast, but there were 18 individual roles, so they kind of played around with that. And then before starting actually going through the show, I wanted to mention, like, the four sisters, and, like, they come back so often that, like, it gets a little confusing. We have Meg, who's our oldest. She's, like, very traditional and, very, like, ladylike in society, like, that kind of girl. Jo's our main character. She's our second oldest. She's, like, very rebellious. She wants to be a writer. And so she's our main character. Third oldest is Beth. She's very timid and shy and, like, to herself. We don't see Beth terribly too much, but she is a really important character. And then Amy is very, like, she wants to be in society, but, like, she's very young, so she's just not there yet. But she's very romantic and, like, wants, a very, like, high quality lifestyle and, like, all this good stuff. So those are our four sisters. And then the only other thing I wanted to say is that the show is majority, sorry, I'm, like, not doing well today, in Concord, Massachusetts, but we do pop back and forth a little bit to NYC, for Jo's, writing stuff. So just wanted to mention, but I'll go tell you obviously where we are. I don't like sitting on concrete, but I want it to be outside. Okay, so let's start talking about the show. I'm gonna try to be like I'm gonna try to answer all the questions as much as possible with this, because this is a really dense show. And some of the things that I'm gonna talk about, like, are like some of the events that are gonna be talking about are like are important to the show, but like this show is so much. Like everything's important in this show. Like I'm usually able to like really condense these plot lines down, but this one, like, there's so many things where it's like if you don't mention this, it doesn't make sense why this character comes back later. You know what I mean? Like you gotta have everything. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so it's 1866. And we're in NYC, and Jo receives a rejection for the 22nd time. Like, literally, she cannot get a break from another publisher. And so she is really, like, frustrated at the beginning of the show. New character, Professor Bear. He and Jo live in Mrs. Kirk's boarding house, where they are both writers, and they're both working together. And so Jo asked Professor Bear for his opinion of her story. And so this is actually when we first see like the characters that we haven't seen yet in the beginning of the show, because we've only met those two so far, being other characters in her writing. Like she's explaining the story, like she's telling the story. Sorry, I just have to flip my hair a million times. She's telling the story of what she's written to Professor Bear, but you're seeing like Meg and Amy and Beth playing other characters in her story, if that makes sense. So that kind of happens simultaneously. And so she asks for his opinion, and he says that she can write something better. And so Jo doesn't take this well, because Jo doesn't take insults or critique well, and she ends up insulting Professor Bear in return for it. So she's like really angry. And then we switch almost immediately back to Massachusetts. And so this is where we are for most of the show. The story shifts 2 years earlier, and we meet Jo's sisters. So we've got Meg and Beth and Amy, and Jo is trying to convince them to perform this piece that she's written for like Christmas. And so all the sisters agree, and you know, they're all like really close at this point, and there's not really been like many problems between them. So they all accept, and they rehearse the piece. And so Jo was like really excited about her piece, and so she asked her sisters for tasks to do. So basically, like, what can I do for you in return? And so Meg wants to be invited to the Valentine's Day ball. Beth wants their father to return home from war. Oh, that was something. Something just like launched at me. Heard it. Beth wants their father to return home from war, and then Amy really wants a Christmas tree. So Jo decides that she can do the Christmas tree thing for sure. So she's like, I'm going to go to Mr. Lawrence's house and chop down a tree. And Mr. Lawrence is this like really crotchety old guy whose like wife passed away a while ago, and he's just kind of been crotchety since. So Jo ends up Jo leaves. I'm like not, my words are not today. And Marmee, their mom, ends up entering and asking the girls about their day, and they're like chatting about Jo's play that they were working on and blah blah blah. And then Jo enters with a fir tree, and she's like, I got it from Mr. Lawrence's estate. And Marmee's like, you gotta take that back, are you serious? And so but there's a family nearby, the Hummel family, who's very poor, and Beth's like, well, why don't we take the tree to them? So Marmee's like, okay. And Mr. Lawrence, again, very crotchety old guy, walks in and demands that Jo repay him for the tree. And so Jo agrees. And Mr. Lawrence leaves, and he had brought his grandson with him, who is Lori, which is the first time we see Lori. And so Lori tells Jo what she did was really brave, like going to get the tree for Amy. And so Jo asked Lori, can you bring the tree to the Hummel family? And so he agrees and brings it to them. A little fast forward, March family. Oh, the sister's last name is March, just in case I hadn't said that. So the March family gets a letter from Mr. March, their dad, and he assures that he's doing well and that he sends his love. He's all good right now. So, a little happy moment for the family. A few days later, Jo ends up going to Aunt March's house, who is their great-grandmother? Not great-grandmother. Great-aunt. I'm sorry. Great-grandmother. Great-aunt, Aunt March. And Aunt March is, like, really high up in society, so she has decided that of the sisters, she wants Jo to take her place in society, and even offers her a trip to Europe. And so Jo's, like, kind of on the fence about it, because Aunt March, like, says that she has to, like, prove herself to be ladylike and all this stuff. And so Joe's kind of like, not really for me, but doesn't like deny it or anything yet. A month later, Joe and Meg are actually getting ready for the Valentine's Day ball, in which Meg had originally like wanted to be invited to, which was really cute. Sorry, I just cracked my wrist in case you heard that. And so Joe and Meg are getting ready for the ball, and Joe is like really uncomfy in a dress because Joe is Joe and she's rebellious and doesn't want to do anything like society, you know. And Meg is shown like being like really scared of going to her first ball, and so Amy ends up coming, and the youngest sister comes in to go to the ball, and Marmee reminds Amy that she's, like, not invited, because it's for, like, you know, the older sisters, and, Amy's like, can I take Joe's invitation, because Joe doesn't even want to go, and because Joe doesn't care about society, and she does. So Joe and Amy end up fighting, and Amy mocks Joe's writing, and Joe ends up taking Amy's fan that she was like gonna bring to the ball, but she's not invited. She takes that fan and says, I'm gonna bring it to the ball. So Joe and Meg end up leaving for the ball, and Amy takes Joe's writing portfolio, the entirety of her writing portfolio, and burns it. I don't like Amy. If you haven't figured it out yet, I don't like Amy. That's just not cool. Like, Okay, moving on. Where are we at? Oh, I lost my place. Oh, here we go. Okay. So, they're at the ball. Joe ends up, like, spilling a drink on another guest and, like, panics. And so she like, grabs Meg and is like, let's go outside. And so they go outside, take a moment, and they run into Lori at the ball. Lori is Mr. Lawrence's grandson. And they also run into Mr. Brooke, who is Lori's tutor. And Mr. Brooke is there to find Lori because Mr. Lawrence wants Lori to, like, meet some high-up society members. So Mr. Brooke is sent to go get him. And so, but Mr. Brooke gets a little distracted. He gets distracted by meeting Meg, the oldest sister. And so he asks her to dance. And so Lori ends up getting, like, left with Joe. And so, they end up talking. And Lori is shown to, like, be attracted to Joe and, like, really likes her. And it's really cute. But they start chatting and they become friends, and actually Joe ends up challenging him to a race across the pond the next day. And so, like, he accepts, and now they have, like, this thing that they're always gonna, like, be challenging each other to, like, races for, like, a couple more times in the show. So the four of them, Lori and Joe, and then Meg and Mr. Brooke, all end up returning to the March house. Birds are making noises. So they get back to the March house, and Meg has a sprained ankle from the night. So, Mr. Brooke is, like, carrying her in. It's kind of cute. Love that. The boys end up leaving, and then Amy and Joe end up making up when they get home. And so Joe goes to find her portfolio and obviously can't find it because Amy burned it. And so Amy proudly admits that she burned it. And Marmee's, like, really angry about it. So Marmee scolds Amy for what she's done, and Joe is, like, really disheartened by this. But she does have a new idea for a story. So that's exciting. We're still on Act 1, and I'm switching papers now. Okay. A few days later, Lori convinces Joe to come skate with him, and to ice skate. And so Beth, the third sister, I get so confused. Beth, the third sister, is playing piano. And she convinces Amy, the youngest sister, to go ice skate with them as kind of like a treaty with Joe. And so Beth gives Amy her ice skates and says, like, go. And so Beth is left alone playing piano, and Mr. Lawrence, the old crotchety guy, comes in and asks Beth to play his late wife's piano. And he says that he's had the piano locked up since she passed away. And so this was, like, a really special moment because like, the other sisters throughout the rest of the show are shown to have, like, romantic relationships with people and blah, blah, blah. And, like, Beth doesn't really have that except for Mr. Lawrence. And it's, I mean, not like a romantic relationship, but, like, just, like, you know, a moment together with someone. And so she ends up, like, almost becoming, like, a granddaughter to him. Like, it's adorable. And so she ends up, like, playing piano for him and stuff, and it's really adorable. especially because he's like really crotchety and like hasn't really like let anyone in his heart, you know. And so it's really sweet that he like let this young girl like play this piano that obviously means a lot to him because his wife had passed away. um so I think that's really cute. So Joe and okay, yeah, moving on. Joe and Lori and Amy end up coming home from the ice rink, and Amy had fell through the ice, and Lori saved Amy. So he's like made an honorary March brother, is what they say. And at this, because of this, Amy and Joe make up and forgive each other for all of that has happened thus far in the show. Um, and then, okay, we move on to the spring. So, yeah, we move to the spring, and we get notice that Mr. March has fallen ill. And so Amy is sent to. There's a bug on my computer. Um, Amy is sent to Aunt March's because she's the youngest sister, while Marmy's gone. And the other sisters can really like take care of themselves, but Amy's kind of a mess. So Amy's sent to Aunt March's, which ends up being like a really good thing for her. Joe is also sent to Aunt March's, but only to get money for Marmy's trip to go see their dad, obviously. And instead, because Joe has proven to not really like Aunt March throughout the show, she ends up going and selling her hair and for money to get Marmy to Washington to see their dad. And so did I get everything? Oh, Aunt March is like really, really angry that she ends up cutting her hair. So she ends up canceling the trip to Europe for Joe, which Joe is like really, really furious about. And yeah. So, and this is kind of a spoiler a little bit early, but she ends up taking Amy on the trip, which makes Joe like really furious eventually. But I just thought that was really like not cool. I don't know. We don't like Aunt March. Okay, so Europe trip. Okay, so then Mr. Brooke, the tutor, Lori's tutor, arrives and proposes to Meg. We saw that coming though. And Joe is really upset about this because the sisters like agreed that they would like never leave each other and all this. So Joe ends up fleeing to the attic where she's like always done her writing and stuff, and Lori ends up meeting her there. And like Lori talks about how he's like really upset because his grandfather is sending him to college, but he's gonna like really miss Joe, and so he ends up proposing. Like he kisses her first, and then he proposes to her, and says, but then she rejects him, and she's like, "This is not happening." And she actually says that she's never gonna marry, and so that obviously upsets Lori a lot, and Lori ends up leaving, and so Joe is decides that she's gonna like leave Concord, Massachusetts, and she's gonna go make her dream a reality and move to New York. And that song, hair in my face. That song's called Astonishing. I'm gonna talk about it later. It's a great song. I just wanted to like note it. It's the final song in Act 1. So Act 2 is next. And I switched to this like really pretty pink color, so I'm excited about it. Okay, Act 2. So we are in New York again, and we're shown at Mrs. Kirk's boarding house, and Joe receives a telegram. She is told by Miss Kirk, like, come get your telegram. And she comes in and she's really excited because she just sold a story finally. And so she's really excited. But that's not what she receives in the telegram. But she's given the telegram right after she, like, goes off about how she's so excited about her story being sold. And then she's given the telegram. And the telegram says that Beth has become very ill, the third sister. And so they were back in Concord, Massachusetts. And Mr. Lawrence and, oh, I forgot to say that Joe goes back home. I missed that. Joe goes back home to Concord, so we're in Concord now. But Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Brooke are shown, and Mr. Brooke is now married to Meg at this point. And they decide to give Beth, Mr. Lawrence's late wife's piano, the one we were talking about earlier. And so she plays with Mr. Lawrence again, and it's a sweet moment as always. And Mr. Brooke, Mr. Brooke mentions that he received a letter from Lori in New York. And Joe was like really confused because she's like, why was Lori in New York and didn't contact me? Because like she's been in New York the whole time, you know what I mean? So she's like confused and upset. So Joe decides, Joe's like really upset about all this because one, with the whole Lori thing in the letter, and then she's upset because Beth is ill, and, you know, Meg got married, and she's just like all these things. So she writes to Professor Bear back in New York, and she's like talking about her family updates, including that Meg's pregnant, and so that was a shock for her too, and Beth's condition, and actually Professor Bear ends up admitting that like the house is like really, really quiet without her, and so that becomes important later, but he just kind of says like it's been quiet without you, and yes. Okay, I think it's so sad because now it's September. Okay, wait. What time period we were before? Oh, we were in the spring. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was on track. I was like, I'm confused. Did we switch years? Just wanted to make sure. Now we're in September. And Joe and Marmee, their mom, take Beth to the beach. And so they have, like, a nice time together with them. And the mood becomes, like, really, really sad, like, very quickly. It gets kind of somber. And Joe is telling Beth that Beth is her special someone, her special person in the world. And Beth talks about how that she knows that she's going to die soon, and that she's like not afraid of death, but the only thing that she is afraid of is that she doesn't want to leave her sisters behind, which is like a really big theme that I've noticed throughout the show, that everyone ends up saying at some point, that they're like, I don't want to leave my sisters behind because my sisters are really important to me. And there's like a lot of like girl power in this show. I love it. I don't know why I did that, but okay. And Beth ends up actually telling Joe to let her go and to die, like that, so she can die peacefully. And that song is called Some Things Are Meant to Be. And let me tell you, it's a tearjerker. So like, don't be expecting a happy song from that one. It's not. It's gonna make you cry. And if it doesn't, you listen to it again, because it made me cry every time. So we get to winter. We were just in September, and Beth ends up passing away, and Amy returns from Europe because of it, and with Aunt March because of the situation, and Joe ends up coming back from from New York to be there. Joe was already there. What am I thinking? I'm a mess. Whatever. I'm a mess. Joe was not in New York. Joe was there. She was at the beach with them. They returned from the beach. Oh, I'm confused about this. Let me know how y'all feel about this, but I don't like it. Lori was in Europe at the same time that Amy was in Europe, and they ended up like getting together and like falling in love and getting engaged. And I was like, I felt kind of weird about that. I don't know if I, as Amy, could date the guy that my sister was like kind of with a little bit. Like, that kind of freaks me out. There's a very large bug coming towards me, so if I randomly move, I'm sorry. Oh, it's going away. Okay. I'll be watching it if y'all see me. But Joe ends up being like really supportive of them, so I was like, okay, go Joe. So Joe ends up she goes to the attic where she always was writing, and Marmee ends up finding her. And they chat about like Joe not being able to write since Beth had died, and like she regrets going to New York and like not being there for the family. And Marmee obviously like comforts her and such. But Joe ends up gaining inspiration to write again. She wants to write in Beth's memory, and she decides to write a book about her family, which, fun fact, is what Louisa May Alcott, who wrote the original book, did. She literally is Joe. Like, that's basically it. And she's writing a book based on her family, which is Little Women. So we move on to the spring, and we're at Amy and Lori's wedding, and Joe actually gets an offer from Aunt March, who Joe hasn't really liked up until this point, but she has a moment. We give Aunt March some love here. She decides, Joe gets an offer from Aunt March that says that if Joe's name is put on her house in her will, that if Joe will promise her to make it into a library or like a school or something, and Joe accepts this, and so her name is put on Aunt March's house in her will. So that's something to look forward to for Joe. Things are looking up. And then Professor Bear arrives at the wedding, actually, from New York. And he comes to Joe and says that he misses her and that since she's been away, and they actually end up admitting their feelings for one another. And he also confesses that he gave his copy of her novel that she had been writing to a publisher and that they want to publish it. So, yeah, we got, I don't know what that noise was. That was so they end up like getting together, which is so cute. And then Amy and Lori are getting married that day, and we already know that Mr. Brooke and Meg have been together for a little bit. And then, so because of them being like confessing their feelings to each other, Joe introduces him to her family at the wedding and yada yada. And Joe ends up like having a moment alone and like ponders like all of the things that she did in her life so far, and that she like really did achieve her dream of like having her books published and all of that. And then she's summoned inside to be with the rest of the family for the wedding, and that's the whole show. That's it. It's really, I don't know, I really love it because of the fact that all of the sisters are very different, and there's always like a character for everyone, you know what I mean? Like you can relate to everyone in this show at some point, you know? Some of my favorite songs from this show are Astonishing, for sure. Everyone loves that song. That's like a really, really popular audition song, so I would not recommend that for an audition song. I would definitely recommend that song as a practice song for like belting and tempo control and breath control and all this, because it's got like a really, really fast part in the beginning, so you're gonna have to keep your breath on with that. And then it has like a lot of like sustained notes at the end that need a lot of power and breath control, but not an so it's good to practice with this song so that you're not pushing or anything. I use that song all the time just for practice purposes. One of my favorite audition songs for this, though, is actually Some Things Are Meant to Be, which is the song it's a duet between Joe and Beth when Beth is actually talking about how she's going to pass away and how she needs to be, how Joe needs to let her go. And I love that song for a duet, actually. There's only like a few parts where they're both singing at the same time, but if you just sing the melody and not the harmony, you are good. And then there's like 2 or 3 parts where they're singing at the same time, but like very short amounts. But you can sing their verses into each other. Like that's what I've done before. And yeah, I think that's super, and it's super easy to cut, so I don't think that would be a problem for anyone to be using. But Astonishing, definitely not. That's so popular. It's super popular, but it's a good song for good reason. Sorry, my computer like did something weird, so I had to click it. It's also going down light. But yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to talk about today. I would definitely recommend listening to the show because it's super, super good. There's a lot of good audition music in it, and I've found so far the music that I've used has been easy to cut. But yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to say. So I'm really glad that you guys stuck around for all these musical geek out sessions, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.